My wife cheated on me with our neighbor, then secretly drained our bank account of $250, $0, and tried to claim our house in the estate dispute. Now I'm facing a courtroom battle over everything we built. I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story about how my wife, Lisa, turned out to be nothing like I thought she was. Honestly, I thought we had a good thing going, 2 kids, a nice house, steady jobs. We seemed happy enough, or at least I did. But then, out of nowhere, everything started to crumble, and I realized I was living with someone I didn't even recognize anymore. The craziest part, all of it came crashing down in a matter of weeks, and the biggest shock was discovering that Lisa had been cheating on me with our neighbor, Jason, and on top of that, she drained our bank account of $250, $0. Just like that, our entire life savings gone. And she had the nerve to try to claim our house in some estate dispute, as if she hadn't already betrayed me in every way possible. I remember the day I found out everything started to fall apart like it was. Yesterday, even though it's been a nightmare ever since. It all began with a simple text on my phone. I was at work, sitting at my desk, when I noticed a message from Lisa's sister, Amy. The message was strange, a little too urgent. She asked if I'd seen the recent bank statements because she was worried about our finances. I thought that was odd since Lisa usually kept a tight lid on our money, but I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe she was just stressed about bills or something. But then I decided to look into it myself. I logged into our online banking that evening, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There in the transaction history was a series of withdrawals I didn't recognize, hundreds of thousands of dollars gone. I checked the account details, and the last transfer was to an account I'd never seen before. It was a wire transfer to a bank in another state. My stomach clenched. I knew right then that something was seriously wrong. I called Lisa immediately, but she didn't answer. That's when I started to get suspicious. I remembered that she'd been acting strange lately, secretive, avoiding my eyes, acting defensive when I asked about money. She'd been bitchy, snapping at me over small things, and I'd noticed her spending more than usual, but I just shrugged it off as stress. The next day, I decided to check her phone. I'd never gone that far before, but something told me I needed to see what was really going on. I found a hidden folder with messages to Jason, the neighbor. They'd been texting each other constantly, talking about their secret meetings and how much they enjoyed each other. I saw pictures of her with him, kissing, holding hands. I felt sick. I'd always trusted her, and now I was staring at proof that she'd been lying to my face for months. She'd been sleeping with our neighbor, Jason, behind my back. All the time she said she was working late or shopping with her friends. Lies. It was like a punch in the gut every time I thought about it. I didn't sleep that night. I kept going over everything, trying to understand how she could do this to me, to us. She was supposed to be my wife, my partner. Instead, she was cheating, stealing, and planning to take everything I worked so hard for. I felt betrayed, furious, and utterly heartbroken. And the worst part, I knew this wasn't just about her cheating. It was about the money she'd drained and the lies she'd spun. I couldn't believe I married someone so manipulative, so selfish. I started to wonder how much she'd lied about everything else, about who she really was. That night I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth and make her pay for what she'd done. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, especially not after everything I'd given her. The next few days were a blur of anger and confusion. I couldn't believe she'd been lying to my face for months, maybe longer. Every time I thought about the money she drained, 250, I felt this deep, burning rage. That's not just some petty theft. That's our future, our security, all gone because she was screwing around with Jason and planning her escape. I started digging deeper into her phone, her emails, anything that could give me more clues. I needed to understand how far she'd gone, how much she'd lied, and what she was capable of. Meanwhile, Lisa kept acting like everything was fine. She'd throw tantrums over small things, call me paranoid when I asked about her whereabouts or her phone. She'd lie and deny everything, saying I was overreacting, that I was being crazy for suspecting her. She'd even have the nerve to accuse me of cheating, which made my blood boil. She'd tell me I was just jealous or paranoid, like I was the problem. But I wasn't stupid. I knew better. I knew she'd been sneaking around, and I had proof now. The photos, the bank statements, the secret texts. I felt like I was losing my mind trying to keep up with her lies. One night I decided to confront her directly. I sat her down in the living room, my heart pounding. I told her I knew everything about Jason, the money, everything. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer, and she started to lie outright. "You're crazy," she spat. "You're just jealous because Jason's better in bed than you are. And the money, I was just trying to pay the bills, you know how tight things are. You're overreacting." She looked me straight in the eyes, lying with this venomous confidence. I could see the lies fall apart as she tried to spin her stories, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I had all the proof, and her face went pale for a second. Then she started to cry, but it wasn't genuine tears, it was more like manipulation. She begged me to believe her, said she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt our family. But I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes, and I knew she was just trying to cover her tracks. That confrontation was the turning point. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. I'd always thought we had something real, but now I realized I'd been living with a liar, a cheat, someone who would do anything to get what she wanted. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. The woman I married was a different person, a selfish, manipulative woman who betrayed everything I believed in. I started to think about how I was going to handle this mess, how I was going to get my life back. I knew I couldn't just let her walk away with the house, the savings, and whatever else she thought she could claim. I had to fight. I had to plan my next move carefully. The hardest part was the emotional toll. I'd loved her, or at least I thought I did. I'd built a life with her, and now it felt like every memory was tainted. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies. But at the same time, a part of me was furious, furious that she'd think she could get away with everything, that she could drain our savings and then try to claim the house as if she was entitled to it. That's when I realized I couldn't just walk away. I needed to fight for what was rightfully mine, for the life we'd built. I started to gather evidence, talk to a lawyer, and prepare for the storm that was coming. Because I knew this was just the beginning and I was done being the victim. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I couldn't let her keep lying and stealing without consequences. I contacted a lawyer, one who specialized in divorce and estate disputes. I needed to know my rights, and more importantly, I needed to figure out how to stop her from taking everything in the chaos. The lawyer was blunt. Lisa's actions had serious legal implications. Draining that much money without my consent was theft, and her attempt to claim the house in an estate dispute was a clear sign she was trying to manipulate the situation. I showed him all the evidence I had gathered, screenshots of her texts with Jason, the bank statements, the transfer receipts, and he told me I had a strong case. The lawyer explained that I could freeze the accounts, prevent her from transferring any more money, and file for an emergency injunction if necessary. That night I stayed up late, making calls, gathering more proof, and drafting a timeline of everything I'd uncovered. It was like building a case against her, piece by piece. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had some leverage, but dread because I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Lisa was a manipulative woman, and I could already see her trying to spin things in court, claiming she was the victim or that I was abusive or controlling. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude shifted. She started acting even more bitchy, throwing tantrums over the smallest things, accusing me of trying to control her, even though I was just trying to protect what was ours. She'd scream at me in front of the kids, calling me paranoid, saying I was crazy for suspecting her. But I wasn't going to let her gaslight me anymore. I knew she'd been planning her escape, and I had to be ready for the fight. I was furious that she'd drain our savings, betray me with Jason, and then try to turn the tables. That $250, $0 wasn't just money. It was the future I'd worked for, the house we lived in, the stability I thought we had. One day, I got a tip from a friend, an acquaintance who knew about Lisa's dealings with Jason. Apparently, she'd been secretly meeting him at a rental house in town, late at night. I couldn't believe it. She'd been sneaking around, lying to my face, while secretly planning. Her escape, that was the last straw. I knew I had to act fast. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to file the paperwork to freeze her accounts and get a court order to prevent her from selling or transferring our house. I didn't want her to pull another stunt and try to claim the house in some shady estate dispute after draining our savings. As I sat there, watching her get more aggressive and bitchy, I realized the woman I married was gone. She'd become someone else, someone capable of betrayal, theft, and manipulation. I felt the cold weight of betrayal pressing down on me, but at the same time I was determined. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything we built. I owed it to myself and to our kids to fight for what was right. I knew the legal battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't going to back down. I'd already lost a part of my trust, but I still had my dignity, and I was going to use that to get her out of my life for good. The court date was set faster than I expected, almost like Lisa was trying to rush things, probably because she knew she was running out of options. I spent days preparing, going through every piece of evidence, making sure I had everything in order. I wanted to make sure she couldn't spin her lies in court, that I had a clear case showing her betrayal, both emotionally and financially. The day of the hearing, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to fight for what was ours, for the house, the savings, everything. When we finally sat in front of the judge, Lisa looked furious, her face hard and bitchy as ever. She kept trying to talk over me, throwing out accusations and trying to paint herself as the victim. She insisted she was just trying to save us from financial ruin, that I was controlling, and that she was entitled to some of the money because she was the wife. Her voice was high-pitched, full of venom, and she looked like she was ready to throw a fit if she didn't get her way. But I had my lawyer and I had the evidence. I laid out everything, her affair, the stolen money, her attempts to claim the house, her lies to the court. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the documents I provided, and then looked straight at Lisa. She asked her some pointed questions about her actions, about the wire transfers, her meetings with Jason, the money she'd taken. Lisa kept trying to deny everything, but her words sounded hollow. Her face was flushed, and she kept trying to spin stories about misunderstandings and bad advice from her friends. I could see right through her. She was desperate and her facade was cracking. I could tell she knew she was losing control. After a few hours, the judge made a ruling. She ordered an immediate freeze on all accounts related to Lisa's name and put a temporary restraining order on her from selling or transferring the house. She also scheduled a full hearing to determine the ownership and distribution of our assets. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief because I knew she couldn't just drain our savings anymore, and anger because I knew this wasn't over. Lisa's face twisted in rage as she left the courtroom, screaming about how I was ruining her life, how I was harassing her. But I didn't care. I'd already seen the truth, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. That night I sat alone in the house, feeling exhausted but oddly relieved. I knew the legal battle was just beginning, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control. I'd exposed her lies, stopped her from taking everything, and now I could start thinking about what comes next. The betrayal still stung deep. I kept replaying her sneaky meetings with Jason, the way she'd lied to my face, the way she'd drained our savings. But I also realized I was stronger than I thought. I'd fought for my rights and I was determined to see this through. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd missed all the signs. But in the end, I knew I had to focus on moving forward. I wasn't just fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting to reclaim my life, to rebuild from this chaos. I knew she'd try to come back, to spin more lies, but I was going to let her. I'd learned a harsh lesson about trust, about how some people will betray you without a second thought, and I promised myself I'd never let anyone do that to me again. The weeks that followed the court ruling were a whirlwind of chaos and realization. Lisa was furious, of course. She threw everything she could think of, insults, accusations, even some petty threats, trying to manipulate her way back into control. But I had the court's order, and I made damn sure I kept everything locked down. I spent those days coordinating with my lawyer, sorting out the legal mess, and trying to figure out what her next move would be. I knew her type. She was the kind that would burn everything down just to get her way. But I was prepared now, and I wasn't going to let her. I also started to dig into her finances beyond what I'd already uncovered. Turns out she'd been hiding more than I knew: secret accounts, offshore investments, even some shady loans she'd taken out under the table. She'd been planning her escape for longer than I suspected, and she'd used every trick in the book to cover her tracks. I felt a mixture of disgust and determination. She'd betrayed me, our family, everything we built, and now I was going to make sure she paid for it. The money she took, those hundreds of thousands, was gone, but her freedom was about to be cut off. I wasn't going to let her walk away scot-free. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the emotional fallout. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. So damn angry that she thought she could steal from me and then lie her way out of it. I'd been a fool to trust her, to think she was the woman I married. Now I saw her for what she really was: a manipulative, selfish bitch who'd do anything to get her way. Every time I saw her bitchy smirk or heard her lie about how hard her life was, I wanted to scream. But I kept my composure. I knew I had to be smart, cold even, to get through this. One night I caught her sneaking around the house again. I'd set up some security cameras after everything, just in case. Sure enough, I saw her meeting with Jason in the backyard, whispering and giggling like teenagers. That was the final straw. I knew she was planning some kind of last-ditch effort to escape, to hide more money or assets. I immediately contacted my lawyer and told him we needed to tighten the restrictions. I wasn't going to let her get away with anything else. The thing that hit me hardest was realizing how much she'd lied and manipulated. She lied about everything: about her fidelity, about the money, about her intentions. All those nights I thought we were building a future, she was secretly plotting her departure. I'd given her everything: my trust, my love, my hard-earned savings, and she'd spat in my face. That realization hurt more than anything, but it also fueled my resolve. I wasn't going to let her take what she wanted and walk away. Not this time. As I looked at the mess she'd left behind, her lies, her theft, her betrayal, I knew I had to rebuild. I started focusing on what I still had: the house, the kids, my sanity. I decided to move forward with a divorce, not just for the financial security but for my own peace of mind. I wanted out of this toxic nightmare. I knew she'd try to fight me in court, to twist everything around, but I had the evidence, and I was ready. I'd learned the hard way that trust is fragile and that some people will do anything to get what they want. My only choice now was to protect myself and move on, no matter how bitter it felt. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, but I was determined to come out stronger on the other side. In the end, the courtroom battles, the legal fights, and the endless days of trying to piece my life back together took their toll, but I finally reached a point where I could breathe again. The judge's final ruling was clear. Lisa was ordered to pay back the stolen money, and she was any claim to the house. The divorce was finalized soon after, and I managed to regain some sense of stability, although nothing could erase the betrayal I'd experienced. I was left with a hard-earned lesson: trust has to be earned, not given blindly, and some people are capable of destroying everything you've built just to satisfy their selfish needs. Looking back, I realize how much I underestimated her. Lisa was a manipulative, bitchy woman who thought she could lie, cheat, and steal her way out of her consequences. She thought she could drain our savings, betray me with our neighbor, and then walk away as if nothing happened. But I learned that no matter how much someone tries to hide their true nature, the truth always comes out in the end. The court, the evidence, the legal system, they all worked in my favor because I refused to back down. The emotional scars are still there, of course. I won't pretend I'm completely healed. Trust is broken, and the wound of betrayal runs deep. But I've come to accept that some things are beyond my control, and the only thing I can do now is focus on rebuilding my life. I've started therapy, talking through everything, and slowly learning how to trust again, this time more carefully. My kids are resilient, and I make sure they see that their father is strong and capable of overcoming even the worst betrayals. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't ignore the signs. Be careful who you trust with your heart and your money. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because if you don't, you might end up losing everything: your savings, your home, your dignity. I lost a lot, but I also gained clarity. I learned that sometimes the biggest betrayal comes from those closest to you, and fighting back requires strength, patience, and a willingness to face the ugly truth. Now I'm moving forward. I'm rebuilding my life, piece by piece, stronger than I was before. Lisa's gone, and with her, the illusion of the perfect marriage. I'll never forget what she did, but I refuse to let it define me. Instead, I'll keep going, wiser and more cautious, knowing that even in betrayal, there's a lesson to be learned. And that lesson: never take trust for granted. Always watch your back. And most importantly, never let anyone steal your future, no matter how convincing their lies may seem.